Yeah, I just wanted to welcome you to the December Sustainability Series. Before we get going, we have a couple of quick announcements and kind of run a show things. I'll turn it over to Patrick Sieb, the Senior Economic Development Director of the DMC. You wanted to say a couple of words at the beginning, and then we'll get started with our program. So today we're excited to welcome Abby Tricker and Barb Beck to talk about kind of the rules of the road and how to best accommodate vehicles and bikes. If folks have questions during the presentation, if they could type them in the chat, and I'll kind of act as moderator to introduce questions during the presentation, that would be wonderful. And we'll have plenty of time for questions. So as things come up or things need to be clarified, just let us know and we'll accommodate those the best we can. With that, I'd turn it over to Patrick for a few words, and then we'll get started with the program.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And I'm not sure why you stumbled on my title. You've only worked for me for 3.5 years, but I do want to say to the group that I wanted to acknowledge Kevin for a couple of things. One, today is the 3rd year anniversary of this series. And maybe you were going to say something about this already, Kevin, but if I'm stealing your thunder, so be it. So this has been, I think, when Kevin first joined Destination Medical Center, he talked about a number of strategies that he wanted to develop and pursue, and the sustainability series was one of those. And he developed it, but really, most importantly, you all have chosen to participate, shape the agendas, come up with ideas, participate in the program, provide leadership. And so I want to applaud both Kevin and all of you who have been using this platform to grow the community knowledge and the conversation around strategies for sustainability. And with that, you don't necessarily know this, but you are all part of a recent success in that Kevin was selected by the USGBC as a lead fellow. And he was submitted an application, and included in the application, among many other of his achievements, is the sustainability series. And so in that way, you contributed to his success and his application. And if you're not familiar with that program, I'll drop something in the chat box. It's a very, very competitive program to be acknowledged as a fellow. There have only been 300 fellows that have been selected over the history of the Green Building Initiative. And the class of fellows this year is quite impressive, including our own Kevin Bright. So I just wanted to open today's meeting by making those comments and inviting you to join me in congratulating Kevin on that success.
Thanks, Patrick. Really, I think it's a testament to everybody here who keeps showing up every month too and making this successful, and so that certainly helps. But it's great that we have interested speakers and interested participants. Without that, it's not that much fun being a sustainability director if no one really cares about sustainability, but that's not the case here. So I think it's really a sign of the willingness and interest of the community in these topics, these areas, and the work itself. So I share it with everybody, if that makes sense. And thanks for all your support too. So with that, maybe we can get back to our regularly scheduled programming now that I'm a little bit embarrassed. So first we have Abby Tricker from Olmsted County and Barb Beck from We Bike Rochester to talk about transportation strategies and rules of the road and how we can accommodate all mobility users here in Rochester, and really these rules are applicable anywhere. So with that, I'll turn it over to Abby, and as questions come up, feel free to include them in the chat. Thanks, Abby and Barb, for being here.
Yeah, thank you. So as Kevin said, I'm Abby Tricker. I work at Olmsted County Public Health. I'm the TCD Safe Roads Coordinator and the CHIP Motor Vehicle Injury Prevention Work Group Lead, or the Community Health Improvement Plan, if you don't know what CHIP stands for. So both of these roles play really well together. They're both focused on traffic safety, and a lot of my focus the last few years has been more around distracted driving prevention. But I'll talk more than just distracted driving. So objectives, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on what our current traffic trends are in Minnesota and then locally as well. Look at local and state strategies that we're employing to reduce the number of crashes on our roads, and then learn about like simple behavior changes that we can all make to protect ourselves and stay safe while we're on the road, and also to keep others who share the road with us safe. All right. So the mission of our group is to move towards zero deaths on our roads using education, enforcement, engineering, and then emergency medical and trauma services. And this is really TZD, or towards zero deaths focus. This is just a group picture of a lot of our partners a few years back before COVID, when we could all gather. But it's really a large effort across the state with lots of different partners. Here, there's a lot of law enforcement just because it was part of a law enforcement wave event that it was taken, but there's way more than just law enforcement involved in our work. It's a statewide initiative, so there's 8 regions in the state, all with regional coordinators for traffic safety, and most of these regions then have county coordinators as well for the traffic safety initiatives. So locally, we have Jessica Schleck. If anyone's ever ran into her, she's a real go-getter. She's a huge resource to our region, and honestly has the most passion I've ever known for someone in traffic safety. So she's great if you ever gotten a chance to meet her before. All right, so I wanted to give a little bit of an idea to show where we were in the past around traffic safety and how far we have come in the past few years since Towards Zero Deaths and other traffic safety initiatives have taken place. Before 2003, we didn't have a strategy really around traffic safety across the state. So Towards Zero Deaths started in 2003. Before that, we were sitting around 600 to 650 deaths per year on our roads because, or I should just say on our roads. So we acknowledged that there was a huge issue and tried to do something more statewide and coordinated around traffic safety. And that's when TZD was created. And you can see that over time, it appears at least that these strategies have worked in reducing the number of crashes and deaths on our roads. But if you look around 2012-ish, we kind of hit a plateau. Where we're not seeing the decline in deaths like we were previously. And so right now we're really trying to figure out what do we need to change in our strategies to start seeing that decrease again in the number of deaths. So I work in the prevention world, and honestly, it can be kind of it's not always super motivating because you can't see the changes or the impact that you're making so much because we're preventing whatever it is, you know, the deaths or chronic disease or whatever it might be. So I like this visual because it gives, I think, the people that work in traffic safety some motivation in that what we're doing really does make a difference. And so this just shows the number of lives that have been saved since we started TZD. If we were to stay on the same trajectory of the like 600, 650 deaths per year. So 3,350 lives saved makes our work well worth it. And hopefully if we can start seeing that decline again versus this plateau, we'll be saving even more lives. I just threw this in here because I think it's funny, and it just shows how far we've come in traffic safety. I also do car seat education for parents and the car seat program at Public Health, and this just cracks me up, honestly, that this was our idea of passenger safety. I don't even know what year this is from, for children, where you just strap in your kid with this strap here and they can do whatever, but you know, they're not going to get in your way while you're driving. So That's a good thing, I suppose. So we've made it a lot. We really have come a long ways. There's still a long ways to go, but I feel like we can at least pat our backs a little bit for how far we've come. Okay, so I wanted to touch on legislative policies and laws, because I think in traffic safety, at least, this is kind of where we can get our biggest bang for our buck on our strategies. We do a lot of education and awareness, but in all honesty, that doesn't always go as far as we hope. And so a lot of times laws and policies are the way to sustain that change in behavior. So this shows the different legislative milestones that have happened in the past 20-ish years. And it also lines up with the number of fatalities. So you can just see from year to year that those legislative changes really do make an impact on the number of traffic fatalities and crashes overall that we're seeing. The most recent legislative milestone was that hands-free law that was passed on August 1st, or went into effect, I should say, on August 1st of 2019. So and that's kind of been my focus the last few years of my work. So it'll be interesting to see how much that impacts the number of fatalities over the long run, and also just overall driver behavior, obviously, around distracted driving. So this is not so rosy of a picture as I was hoping to share with you all. 2020 has been rough in many ways, not only with COVID and a tumultuous election season and people being polarized across the nation, but in Minnesota, our number of traffic deaths have been substantially higher compared to last year. And it's a little bit discouraging, in all honesty. So in this year, up to December 1st, so January 1st through December 1st, there have been 364 deaths on our roads. If you look at 2019, at the same time, we had 335 deaths. So that's a 29 increase of 29 compared to the year prior. And when you look at 2019's total deaths for the entire year, so including December, which is basically missing in these numbers for 2020, we were at the same amount of 364 deaths. So this has really shaken the traffic safety world. We're trying to figure out, what's changed, and I'm going to attribute it to COVID. Like everything else, that has impacted people's behaviors on the roads. But we'll just have to see as time goes on, what we think was maybe leading to these issues. I did want to point out that pedestrian deaths and bicyclist deaths are actually pretty similar to 2019. In fact, they're a little bit one less for each, but we did see a big jump in motorcyclist deaths, and I think a lot of that has to do with the weather. It was nicer in the spring, it was nicer this fall, warmer, and so there was a longer season for riding motorcycle. And then also, I think people didn't have much else to do. There wasn't other entertainment options, and so there were more folks out on motorcycles because that was something you could do during the summer. Lastly, I just want to point out what our goal is for 2025. So we're hoping for no more than 225 fatalities per year by 2025, and no more than 980 serious injuries by 2025. And that's actually a really lofty goal from looking at where we've been the last few years. It would be quite the decrease, but we might as well set our goals high. All right, this is just, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this just shows the number of fatalities over the last 5 years by county for the Southeast region. Again, when you look at the region overall, we're not seeing the large increase in deaths compared to other parts of the state. So I guess that is something positive to take away, even though 2020 has been rough over all of Minnesota.
Hey, Abby, there's a question for you in the chat too about motorcycle deaths and attributing those to the helmet law, where motorcyclists aren't required to wear helmets.
Yeah. It's been interesting. So the last couple years, I've had motorcycle safety as part of my strategies that I want to work on. And I mean, it's kind of like, I can relate it to masking. There's this, it's my right, my decision. You're not going to tell me what to do. And I think even if we mandated helmets, I'm not sure how well received it would be, and if people would follow it, in all honesty. As a traffic safety advocate, obviously, we're all in support and want people to wear helmets and also other protective gear when riding a motorcycle. But it's just, it's come up against so many roadblocks to try to push that forward and to get the support that it hasn't happened. So yes, I would totally agree. Wearing a helmet would make a huge difference, and we probably wouldn't see as many fatalities. But at this point, at least, the appetite for change on a law related to helmet use, I don't think is there. Okay, so I want to talk about what contributes to crashes. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that really human error is the largest contributor. Your behavior is what, in 93% of crashes, there was human error that played into the crash. So a lot of our strategies are focused on changing behavior. So that could be education and awareness. It could be passing, legislation. It could be enforcement by law enforcement. Anyway, so changing behavior is really our largest focus, but roadway environment does play a large role too. About 34% of crashes, there's a contributing factor from the roadway, and then a lesser contribution from the vehicle itself. So our focus, like I said, is behavior change. And in all honesty, I think the biggest thing right now is we're just trying to create a culture shift. Right now, most people, oops, sorry about that. Most people treat driving as something that they just happen to be doing rather than what it really is, as a huge responsibility that you undertake when you get inside a vehicle. So realizing that there's a responsibility, there's liability when you decide to drive a vehicle or share the roadway, and that it needs to be treated that way versus just something that you do. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about distracted driving, just because, like I said, that was my focus the last few years, and then the hands-free law was kind of the culmination of all that work. And distracted driving behavior, that has been a huge issue. And I'm sure when you're out on the roads, you've noticed people on their cell phones or doing other things like putting mascara on or reading a book, or there's a whole menagerie of things I've seen people doing on the roads. But just in general, we wanted to get a better idea of what is happening, because we didn't have any data around adult distracted driving. We had a little bit on youth from the Minnesota Student Survey, but we didn't have anything for adults. And so the community health needs assessment included a question around distracted driving this past round of the survey. So that was really helpful for us to kind of gauge where our county was at. And in that survey, 82% admitted to doing at least one of the behaviors listed. So answering phone calls, reading texts or emails, or sending texts or emails, and using other apps, which not surprising, but alarming. And then 24%, so a quarter of those respondents, admitted to doing all of these behaviors. And so I will be excited to see, this was before the hands-free law, if they include this in the survey again to see what those numbers are, and hopefully, I hope, those numbers will decrease with the passing of the hands-free law. So just as an FYI, I would think that you're all pretty familiar with what it means, the hands-free law. Essentially, it's just saying that you can't hold your cell phone and use it while driving. If you have Bluetooth or voice command, or you can mount it to your dash, all of those things are allowed. It's just you can't physically be holding the phone. And this by no means is distraction free, but it is a step in the right direction. And again, I think, maybe down the road, things will change. Maybe we can strengthen the law, but the appetite for that was not there. So this is like the first step in the right direction. Local highlights. I just wanted to share a few other things that we work on. So the policy development is one piece with the hands-free law. We do lots of education out in the community before COVID on distracted driving, specifically with our distracted driving simulator. So out in the schools, kids love that. We also brought it to Thursdays downtown a couple of times last year, other community events. So that's just a nice way to engage the community and start talking about distracted driving. We've done a lot of unified messaging with local law enforcement during enforcement waves. So there's enforcement waves for seatbelt use, speed, impaired driving, and distracted driving. And so when those waves occur throughout the year, we try to do that unified messaging so the community is aware of what's happening around enforcement. Pre-COVID days, we did seatbelt challenges in the high schools, which was just a fun way to get kids involved and wearing their seatbelt, get that message out there. And that was something, well, we do it countywide with the schools. This year, we were hoping to do it regionally, but then that got put on hold with COVID. Motorcycle education and promotion. So around the flood run, we would do campaigns and a news conference just to stress. And here again, we were hoping to include a helmet message, but it wasn't super well received either. So we went more in the direction of motorists to watch out for motorcycles when they're driving. So we did that in 2019. It was planned again for this year, but that didn't happen because of COVID. And then this year, what was something new was pedestrian safety activities. TCD never focused on pedestrian or bicyclist safety, which is, I know, kind of I don't know. It was a little bit frustrating, to say the least. But there was recognition in the past couple of years that we had been seeing an increase in pedestrian and bicyclist deaths. And so it was an option to include pedestrian safety this past grant year. So it was a new strategy. We were hoping to do some crosswalk enforcement events, but again, because of COVID, that didn't happen. And we're hoping that this spring and summer we'll be able to do those as we had planned before.
Thanks, Abby. As you're working through some of your slides, there's another question came in of, has the county or others utilized a community-based social marketing approach for behavior change? And there's a link included that points to the resource that they're referring to.
Sure. We do have a media specialist that works within the sheriff's office that has done a pretty good job of at least getting that social media presence out there. Beyond that, I mean, we haven't really pushed anything else. There's always potential to improve, though, I will say that. So I'll check out the link.
Sounds good. I think the challenge that you referenced that run in high schools would be a pretty close example to it.
Yeah.
That's an example, yeah.
Yeah, I think we could definitely explore it. It's hard when you have a grant that can be kind of limiting in what is allowed. But it's not, it's not like we couldn't ask and maybe get clearance to move forward with something a little more innovative. The last thing I just want to do, just some basic reminders on what you can do yourself personally to keep yourself safe and others on the road safe. Obviously, slow down. We've seen a large increase in the number of individuals going over 100 miles an hour on our roads, tickets that have been written for that across the state. So we've seen a large increase in speed issues in 2020. We want to encourage people, obviously, to don't drink and drive, don't drive impaired. If you are going to choose to drink, to have a sober ride set up, buckling up, follow local traffic laws. And then I like to talk a little bit quick about distracted driving. There's a few things beyond cell phones that people do that can get you in trouble and distracted. So planning ahead, such as setting up your music before you start driving, adjust your mirrors, get your heat or AC on, all that kind of stuff. So you're not fiddling with those controls while you're driving. If you're going to use some kind of navigation system, have your GPS route, like have everything set up before you start driving. Avoid messy foods, secure your drinks, have a cover on hot beverages. I had a friend that used to drive with a mug of coffee in her hand. Just like, that seems like a really bad idea. So anyway, think before you do silly things like that. Teach children the importance of good behavior in a vehicle, model that proper behavior, driving behavior, because chances are they're going to pick up on whatever bad behaviors you show when they start driving. And then if you are a passenger and you notice that your driver is doing something that is distracting them, either offer to help them with something, and then of course just reinforce like you shouldn't be doing that. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm wondering, would it be better, are there any other questions, or do we want to just jump to Barbara and we can come back to me if there are more?
No other questions have come in, so maybe the latter at the moment. Yeah.
All right, I'll stop sharing my screen so Barbara can hop on.
Great, thanks, Abby.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. So as Kevin mentioned, I'm Barbara Beck, and I am, in addition to being a board member with Bike Rochester, I'm also a league cycling instructor, certified by the League of American Bicyclists. And locally, I'm also a member of the Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee. This might sound like I spend my entire life doing bicycling, but it's only about a third. So bear with me. So the objectives today are to...
Barb, we aren't seeing your slides quite yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know when it's a go.
Yeah, they're not, I'm not seeing them. I don't know, Abby, or if you're...
Maybe Abby.
I quit sharing mine.
Might just be a lag. Are we there yet?
Not yet, no.
Oh.
There you go. Yep. Oh, we can see your Zoom screen. Perfect.
And now I can't see what I want to see over here. So I'm going to do this and then, okay, there we go. All right, so what I want to talk about is how bicyclists and motorists can safely share the road so that everyone comes out of the experience okay. I'm going to spend a considerable amount of time talking about some of the bike infrastructure in Rochester because I know that's a big topic for a lot of people. They don't know what to do when they see it on the roadway. And then at the end, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the value of an increase in bike commuting for individuals and for the community as a whole. So I'm going to start with some of the Minnesota laws that pertain to bicyclists, because not everybody is aware of these. Bicyclists do have to obey the same traffic laws as motorists. We are not required to wear a helmet, although it is very, very highly recommended. I suspect that we're not required because my motorcyclists aren't required either. There are laws about passing a bicyclist on the road. A motorist must provide a minimum of 3 feet passing distance. We appreciate it very much if you're more generous in the amount of space that you give us. And in that vein, a couple of years ago, the Minnesota legislature passed a law that said that motorists may cross a double yellow line to pass a bicyclist when it is safe to do so. This is a big advance. I think a lot of people don't know about this because I see them trying to edge around me without crossing over the double yellow line. And so if you know people who don't understand this, then I would be ecstatic if you would share this information with them. Motorists and bike lanes. Motorists cannot drive or park in a bike lane. They can, of course, cross bike lanes, and I'll show you how that's marked usually on the roadways. Is it legal for bicyclists to ride between the lanes? No, it's not. It's usually called lane splitting. I haven't seen anybody do this for a while, so it must be getting out there that this is not legal. Do bicyclists have to ride with the direction of traffic? Yes, they do. I know people who think that it's safer to ride against traffic, the way when you're a pedestrian and there's no sidewalk that you ride against traffic, but it's not safer. There are data that show that it's not safer to ride against traffic. Must the bicyclist ride in a bike lane if there is one? The answer to that is no. And I have a whole slide explaining the circumstances under which that might happen. Is it legal for a bicyclist to ride on the sidewalk? Yes, or sometimes I should say. In Rochester, it's forbidden only in the downtown business district. That's basically, I think, from 2nd Street North to 6th Street South, and from the Zumbro River out to either 4th Avenue or 6th Avenue West. I can't remember where the boundary is on that side. Must the bicyclist ride on the sidewalk or a multi-use trail where there is one? No, similar to the situation with bike lanes. May bicyclists ride 2 abreast? Yes, if there's room. If they are riding 2 abreast, they need to be in the same lane. Or if they're riding on the shoulder, there needs to be room enough for that. Does a bicyclist have to signal turns? Yes, just the way motorists do. But we are permitted to put our hands on the handlebars as we're going through the turn. So the usual scenario is that you signal your turn about 100 feet before where you want to make your turn. And then if you're stopped at an intersection as a bicyclist, if I am stopped at an intersection, I usually stick my arm out to indicate where I'm going to go. A couple of times, maybe if it's a long light, and then just before or just when the light turns green. But I put my hands on the handlebars to control the bike when I'm actually making the turn. Okay, so this is a big topic here. The issue is that in the past, the law read that bicyclists on the roads had to stay as far right as possible. A few years ago, this was changed to have it read that bicyclists must stay as far right as is practicable. And what is practicable is basically in the mind of the bicyclist most of the time. When the alternative to riding on the right is to do what we call taking the lane, which is riding in the middle of the lane. And here are the times when a bicyclist is going to want to do this. It can be unsafe to ride in the shoulder when there are parked vehicles. So sometimes there's wide lanes and there's parked cars, but there's not all together. And a bicyclist actually doesn't want to be weaving in and out of the travel lane to avoid parked cars and then moving back and so on and so forth. That's a lot of action that doesn't need to happen. So the bicyclist is probably going to take the lane under those circumstances, or they should take the lane. It's unsafe to ride in the shoulder when there's debris, sand, broken glass, gravel, snow, which could be coming along here someday. So those are situations where and the motorist might not even be able to tell that that's the reason, but that is a good reason for not riding in a bike lane or along the shoulder. Now I want to get to the situation where the lane is too narrow. So a lot of the travel lanes in Rochester, in neighborhoods and even downtown are 11 feet wide. That is actually too narrow for a bicyclist and a vehicle to ride side by side, to travel side by side. You just can't pass, the vehicle can't pass safely under those circumstances. The best thing for a bicyclist to do under those circumstances is to take the lane, to ride right in the middle so that the vehicle is not encouraged to move around and pass unsafely. Bicyclist doesn't want to be over on the right when they need to make a left turn coming up. So if it's a wide lane and they've been riding over on the right, the bicyclist should signal to move into the traffic lane and then make the turn from there. Bicyclists will also move into the traffic lane if they feel a need for increased visibility. We all know that the profile for bicyclists on the road is not very wide, so it's fairly easy to miss them. I have experienced that it's much easier to see them when they're actually in the travel lane. Now I want to get into the bike infrastructure. So I have a lot of pictures. These are all pictures that I took in Rochester. So they're not professional quality. But this is an example of older bike infrastructure, which is not really being used anymore. This symbol is called a sharrow. It is a created word meaning an arrow above the symbol of the bike. That means that the lane is to be shared between motorists and bicyclists. It's not a great message. It's not an obvious message. And particularly in this location, I don't like that it's on sort of the right half of the lane, sort of indicating the bike still should be over there when it's not really true. And the other reason that I think it's going out of fashion is that it leaves the impression that motorists only have to share the traffic lane on streets that have these symbols. And that's not true. By law, bicyclists have access to all these roadways. All right, so now we get into modern bike infrastructure. Actually, it's not so modern, just this simple straight lane. I moved here from Seattle 40 years ago, and Seattle already had striped bike lanes then before I left. Okay, so this is on 6th Street Southwest, looking eastbound. You can see this is where the co-op is, People's Food Co-op. In this bike lane, so this is very simple. There's a symbol for a bike. There's a directional arrow. This is needs to be repainted. Actually, they're gonna do the work on this street, I understand, next year. I think there's a sign up here for bike lane. I think that's what that B is about there. I didn't catch everything in my picture, but that's a simple striped bike lane. And they're helpful not just because it's a space for bikes to ride, but The fact that there's a solid white line here indicates that vehicles should not be moving over into that area. That should be viewed as a barrier. They can cross it, of course, if they're moving into a driveway or coming out from a driveway. Now here's another situation. This is 9th Street Southeast, and this travel lane here is westbound towards Broadway, but this picture is taken looking east because I want to show you, here comes the bike lane. And then here we have a place where the bike lane moves over in between two travel lanes, and there's broken lines. And the broken lines indicate that if this vehicle here wants to move into the right turn lane, that this is the place where that vehicle is allowed to cross the bike lane. So broken lines generally mean vehicles can cross the bike lane. Now the next picture is basically from the same spot, but looking the other direction, just so that you can see what this looks like. So this is Broadway here. We're looking west. Here's the right turn lane. Here's the bike lane. Here's going straight and turning left for vehicles. I ride this road almost sometimes every day. And you might think that this looks unsafe for bicyclists. It's really not. I've been doing this for a long time. If people experience this for the first time and get a few funny glances, but otherwise they're fine with it. Some of you might remember that the bike lane used to be over here, and that created the uncomfortable situation that if a cyclist was sitting in this bike lane and wanted to go straight into Soldiers Field Park, there was a conflict so that the travel lane then was across here, the car would be here and it wanted to turn right. And then you have a crash situation potentially with a bicyclist. Not good. The city became convinced that they needed to move the bike lane over here. Let me see, anything else about that? Guess not. Okay. Now, so those are striped bike lanes. We consider that they are not protected. There's no barrier between the bike lane and the roadway. So now we're going to get to some lanes that have some protection.
Barb, we had a quick question come in on the last slide. So
Okay.
on the bike lane striped, no protection, you can either go straight, turn left, or turn right in that circumstance? Or what would your recommendation be?
Actually, the recommendation here is if you want to turn right, I meant to say this. I knew there was something else I wanted to say, and I kind of spaced it out. The bicyclist turning right should stay in this lane. Whoops. All right. Sorry. Going straight, the bicyclist wants to be in the middle. If the bicyclist wants to turn left, they should actually sit behind the vehicles in this travel lane. Since this is Broadway here, I'm thinking that they aren't wanting to turn left there, or right for that matter. There's actually bike paths on both sides of Broadway in this section, so I don't think it comes up too often. Good question though. All right, now buffered bike lane on eastbound on Center Street East. So this was created this spring and summer. So by a buffer, we mean this area in here, solid white lines. So again, the vehicle should not be crossing the solid white line here. And bicyclists should be contained within the bike lane, but this is about 3 feet wide, doesn't look it in the photograph necessarily, but this just delineates some space as some extra protection for the bicyclist. Of course, again, vehicles can cross the bike lane after they look for bicyclists that might be coming up from behind to get into driveways and to exit from driveways. Here's another situation where there are buffered bike lanes. So this is the new infrastructure on 4th Avenue Northwest, and this intersection is at Civic Center Drive. Now back here, there was a buffer. I didn't include this in the photograph because I wanted to show very distinctly what's happening here. This travel lane is for straight ahead and a right turn. I'm sincerely hoping that this vehicle is wanting to go straight ahead, A, because they're not signaling to turn right, and B, because they really should be moving over into the bike lane here. That's what the broken line is about here, is that we want the motor vehicles to move over here, again, so there's no conflict with bicycles going straight and vehicles trying to turn right. Okay, that's known as a right cross crash, and those are among the most common kind between vehicles and bicycles. And you can see the bike lane continues across the intersection, and then the buffer zone reappears here. Okay, I ride up and down 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue all the time on these bike lanes. All right, next one. Now we get into protected bike lanes. This is the infrastructure that was put in, I think it was in 2019. I don't know how many years ago that was. This is a protected bike lane for 2 reasons. One, there is a buffer zone, and between the bike lane and travel lane, there is semi-permanent physical barrier. So this is a really temporary barrier. There will be semi-permanent barriers, or maybe someday permanent barrier in this buffer zone. And then there's also spaces for cars to park. So the bike lane is actually separated from the travel lane by parking and buffer with some physical protection. So this is, you know, getting up there in terms of protection.
Barb, there's a question too about the significance of the green paint we've been seeing.
Yeah, green paint is sort of the universal color for bike lanes. I would love it if it was solid green paint for the entire bike lane. But guess what? This green paint is expensive. We try to use, they try to use as much as they feel they need to sort of really set it off. And then we hope that people understand. Okay. All right, now we're going to travel on 3rd Avenue northbound. So this is just north of 4th Street. This is, again, a buffer zone, but it's, again, like on 4th Street, it's supposed to have either semi-permanent or permanent barrier in here. So it will be a fully protected bike lane. We're going to move along now, along on 3rd Avenue, up towards, this is 2nd Street. So we have the Mayo building there. Here's the buffer zone, and you notice that the buffer zone disappears here. And that's because, just like at that intersection on 4th Avenue and Civic Center Drive, we want vehicles turning right to move over into the bike lane, again, having first checked to see that there aren't bicycles either about to enter that space or already in that space. So vehicles turning right should move over there and turn. I know that, yeah, is there a question, Kevin?
Yeah, there's one more question, sorry. And it's applicable to this example you're talking about too. So sometimes there might be cars idling in the bike lanes along 3rd and 4th Avenue. How should a person on a bike handle that situation?
That situation should not be happening. We understand that buses sometimes need to do that, but personal vehicles should not be doing that. It's actually illegal. And when I said before they can't drive or park in a bike lane, idling is standing, and that's also not permitted in a bike lane. Yep, eventually folks are going to get ticketed for that.
So in the circumstance that it does happen, what would your recommendation be to kind of move through that safely?
We have to wait and move out into the traffic lane. But I will let people know that we have a little app called Our Streets that bicyclists have downloaded. And we take photographs of cars sitting in these spaces and submit them to the city. So yeah, we're collecting data. I mean, we can see the anonymized data ourselves. And Third and Fourth Avenues are, they temporarily put up some bollards there too, but as soon as the bollards got taken away, the bad behavior resumed. So that's why we're really wanting to get some physical barrier in there. Okay, now, yeah, moving across this intersection. This looks a little complicated, but it's really not, in that this is the bike lane, the green paint here. Here we've used a lot of green paint to make it less confusing. Buffer zone on either side, because this is a drop-off zone for the Mayo building, and we need to, and it's got broken lines, so cars should understand that they can move over there. This seems to be working pretty well. I just want to interject that I ride up and down this a lot. And even before there was bike infrastructure here, I rode up and down here and actually felt pretty safe because of how slowly the traffic moves here. There's traffic light at 4th Street, traffic light at 2nd Street, traffic light at 1st Street, traffic light at Center Street. I can pretty much keep up with the traffic too under this circumstance. So bicyclists should be going along here. Bicyclists should be aware. I know I try to be hyper aware under these circumstances of vehicles moving in and out. If we move further along, here's the intersection with 1st Street Southwest, the entrance to the drop-off region for the Gonda building. Pull in for these buses for, it might be from some of the hotels and motels. I'm not sure all of who all is allowed in here. But again, the bike lane goes past that outside, and then there's an exit back here from the Gonda building. I use this at least a couple times a week, if not more, and I feel it's really enhanced the safety. There will never be any kind of barriers along here because of all the pull-ins and driveways and so on. The last item of bike infrastructure that people have a right to be confused about is the bike box that appeared, or I should say was installed in 2019 at 4th Street and 1st Avenue Southwest. The way this is supposed to work is that bike boxes can only be placed at signalized intersections. Motor vehicles are to stop at the thick white line behind the bike box. There's a sign up here about stopping there on the red. There's actually no turn on red at an intersection with a bike box. And the bike box only comes into play when the light turns red. Because what happens when the light turns red and you have bicyclists coming up the bike lane is that they will move into the bike box and position themselves depending on where they want to go. If a bicyclist wants to turn left here, they will position themselves here. If they want to go straight, they should position themselves right there. If they want to turn right, they need to position themselves there. The bike box is behind the pedestrian crosswalk, I would point out as well. So that's how that's supposed to work. I have used it. There's a whole video that the city made about the bike boxes, or this is the only bike box we have so far. Lastly, I want to talk about that bicycling really is a green travel mode. This is pretty obvious, human powered, so no fossil fuels involved. Might be a little bit if you have an e-bike. There are a fair number of e-bikes around Rochester, but not super many just yet. Bicycles don't hardly increase any wear and tear on the roadways, not at all compared to the vehicles. The more folks that bicycle commute, the fewer parking spaces are needed in the community. There's also less traffic. For every cyclist that commutes to work, there's one less vehicle on the roadway. And there's less time that the vehicles spend idling and hunting for parking spaces, so that the traffic should move easier. Bicycling's quieter, cheaper, all sorts of good stuff. I'm going to skip the next slide because I don't think I have time. Additional personal and community benefits of bicycling. It's great exercise. It's a great family and group activity. Some of you may have noticed, maybe all of you have noticed that during these months of the pandemic, bicycling has really increased in our community. Bike shops couldn't keep bikes in supply. They if you didn't already have a bike, you were going to have a hard time getting one for a while. Bicycling is just a fantastic way to be able to travel somewhere and also be able to appreciate the natural world around you. You can marvel at the sunsets and whatnot. You can engage with your neighborhood. I have often stopped and chatted with people when I've been out on my bike. It's easy to stop and patronize local businesses. You can park really close. Most of the time you can park right by the store. Even if they don't have bike parking, you can find some place to stash the bike. For short trips, biking can actually be faster than if you consider the amount of time it takes you to park your vehicle and walk to your destination. Yeah, and as I said, when I'm riding on 3rd Avenue past the Mayo and Gonda buildings, I mentioned I can keep up with the traffic. They go faster from light to light, but I'm catching up to them in between the lights. So it's really, I think even if you're a dedicated motorist and you don't really have the opportunity to bike commute, you should be in favor, I think, of those who do bike commute because it leaves more space for you on the road. So if there are questions that you have for me that I can't answer now, you're welcome to email me at the address listed down here. So if there are any other questions in the chat box, Kevin, I will entertain those.
None at the moment, but maybe first we can acknowledge both of you for your participating today. Really appreciate your presentations. We're almost at 1 p.m. So if there are last minute questions that folks have, feel free to chime in now or go off mute or type them in the chat and we can host those. Just a lot of messages of thanks and appreciation to you both. So with that, we are at 1 p.m. So I just want to be mindful of people's time and share one final thanks and gratitude both to Abby and Barb for joining us today and sharing your expertise and knowledge in these areas with the community. And I think they're quite serious and when they provide their information that if you do have questions or want some follow up on any of the topics from today, don't hesitate to reach out to them. As just kind of a close of the logistics, I'll be sure to share the slides from today pending their kind of their receipt from Abby and Barb. So if you don't mind sharing those with me, and then I'll share the recording from today as well. But mostly thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to our speakers and have a safe and happy holiday season coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.